Good morning, everybody. Reverend Mark Gilbert back with you again. It's great to return in our rotating series of speakers leading these Saturday morning Science of Mind conversations. Thank you for joining us today. Like always, for those of you who are coming on, drop a note in the chat to indicate your name and where you're from so we can know who all is watching live. So if you're watching live, drop me a chat that lets me know where you are and who is here. And I so appreciate that. And good morning to Shay. It's great to have you here. And anyone else that's joining us, let's see. We've got Eddie from New York. And blessings to you as well, Eddie. Thank you for joining us. And I just want to just let you know what we're doing this morning. I think this is going to be a little bit of a different show, and I hope that you enjoy it. I got some exciting things planned for you. And Shay is telling me where she is in Cedar Ridge, Colorado. Cedar Edge, I guess I should say. Cedar Edge, Colorado. I am not sure where Cedar Edge is. I'm in Lakewood, Colorado, but maybe I would have to get my map out later and figure out Cedar Edge. And thanks for the words, Eddie. Appreciate it. What we are going to be doing this morning, well, it sort of ties to how we've been running these programs for the last couple of years. I've been blessed to be able to be one of the rotating speakers on the program. It's both last year and this year. What we did was we ran through the entire Science of Mind textbook through the first Saturday starting in January and running through the time we finished them, which was somewhere in August, as I recall. And last year we decided that we would support the Science of Mind archives by highlighting other documents, books, transcripts, things of that nature that perhaps you might not be aware of and that we could share and to help point to the archives is a wonderful resource to support you in your spiritual journey and the study and understanding of the principles and concepts of science of mind. So they've allowed the leaders to select the content from that, and I have to give you a little bit of a backstory because what we're going to be doing today is actually looking at a book that was recently published by the archives, and I had a major role in it, which I'll describe in a few minutes, and that is my role was in compiling the contents, writing the introduction, and so forth. But I'll get into that in a minute. But the book is called Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. And I'm going to encourage you, if you haven't already checked it out, to do so. The more on that in a little while. But I want what we're going to be doing is a little bit of a history lesson. So although we will talk about some of the content in the book and discuss it a little bit, we've got some exciting stuff that we're going to be doing, including showing you a little bit of the history. I'm going to describe how the book came about. And then I want to allow you to know a little bit of the history of how summer conferences and our founder Ernest Holmes went to Asilomar and how he spoke there and how that led to transcripts, etc. And that's what we're going to be getting into. And I've got some slides and pictures and things I think you're going to find from a historical nature. But as always, these Saturday morning programs are designed to be a conversation. So I'm encouraging you to post, your comments, your questions in the chat, and I will watch for them and bring them up, and we can, by stream of consciousness flow into that. And if I know that it's something that's going to be coming up, I may let that know. Good morning, Linda. Great to have you here with us. And where are you in the world? Linda, maybe drop a little note so we can show that as well. Hey, Tracy, you're loving and reading the book. Thanks for compiling it. I appreciate it, Tracy. We've had a lot of great feedback on the book, and I have been really pleased with its reception. So that's where we're going this morning, and I just want to give you just a sort of a backdrop or a little bit about the book itself. This book right here, and there's the cover of it, was published back in late July. How did it come about? Well, a couple of years ago now, I got on the board of the Science of Mind archives, and in my role there, in addition to being on board meetings and so forth, I asked how I could support the archives, and that led me into doing a lot of volunteer work on the backside of their website, where I started looking at the numbers of unpublished works we had from Holmes, and they had not been put out on the website yet for the archives. And so I started working on that and discovered that we had a lot of audio recordings. And so we've been bringing those out this year. So I'm really excited about that project. But in the midst of doing all of that, I was trying to get my head wrapped around what all did Ernest Holmes actually do, and that we had content of. And so we know about so many of his books, that are out in the world, but there's so many other documents, and he was a very prolific person. And so in that question that I had in trying to bring all this stuff out on the website for the archives, I started creating an inventory which is actually on the archives website. You can link into it and view it and download it for your own use. I'll talk about that a little later. But in the creation of that archive, that inventory, I realized that we had a lot of unpublished talks from Ernest Holmes from Asilomar, the summer conferences and if you're not familiar with Asilomar, it's a conference center on just south of Monterey, California, in Pacific Grove. And it's a beautiful setting, and it became in the 1950s the setting where religious science conferences were held each summer. And so what I want to do, and let me just finish off the thought about the creation of the book. So after the idea that we had a lot of talks that were unpublished, I thought, well, why don't we bring them out in a book and maybe find some pictures from Asilomar at the time, and I sort of floated the idea by the board, and they loved it. We met with the Science of Mind Publishing, and they loved it and said, let's bring it out. Everything, I said, all the stars lined up. Any barrier that came up was immediately dissipated. And one of the early things that we discovered, and when the decision was made that we were going to move forward on creating this book, was we realized that Centers for Spiritual Living was actually having an Asilomar conference in 2023, which was back in early August. And so here we were back in 2022, less than a year from the conference, and we said, we're going to get this book ready and done by then. And so even though I'm a volunteer for the archives, we moved into fast mode. I did a lot of research, compiled the book, wrote the introduction to it, got the essential aspects of it developed, searched for pictures, created a list of pictures that we could consider including in the book, and so forth. And then we went through the process of getting it edited. I was working daily with the editors to bring it forth, and then the book layout and so forth. And so now it is available. It's up on sale on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and search for the title, you will find it, and it's available both in paperback and as a Kindle version, and more on that later as well. But that's the story of the creation of the book. And I also was asked to do a presentation at Asilomar about the book, which I was blessed to be able to do that. And what we're going to do for a few minutes here is I'm going to go through some things about it's sort of a mini version of what was shown to the folks who were at Asilomar back in August. I'm going to show you some of the slides and some of the history regarding the book. And I just want to thank you, Linda, for letting me know that Cedar Edge, Colorado is in the mountains of Colorado. I love the mountains. My wife and I go camping frequently. In fact, that's coming up again. We were just up in Frisco area camping last weekend. And I see that Fiona's here from Geneva, Switzerland. Hello, Fiona. It's good to see you, and thank you for being with us. And just encourage everybody again that if you're joining us and you're on live, be sure to drop your name and location in the chat so I can bring that up. And also, if you have a question about anything I'm covering, feel free to drop that in there. And periodically, I'm going to do my best to multitask and I'll allow you to ask questions, and I can stop and maybe go off on a little tangent. Hello, Wayne from Calgary. Always good to hear from you. And also Roy. Roy is in from Fort Morgan. Good to have you with us again, Roy. We got a lot of folks I know that are on that are part of our regular coming in on Saturday morning. It's great to have you. So what I want to do now is give you sort of a little bit of a history lesson about how Asilomar and its conference center became so important to the religious science movement and science of mind. And it was, um, it all sort of started with, if we could look back at the beginnings of the movement, originally Ernest Holmes, when he started writing back in the around 1818, 1819 was his first book, and 1918. And then in the 1920s is when he formed his first organization, started publishing Science of Mind magazine. The first edition of the Science of Mind textbook came out in the 1920s, and it was revised in the 1930s. Ernest, as he launched his ministry, as his teachings, he saw it as an educational institute. And in fact, the organization was first considered only an educational institute. But people got such deep spiritual meaning from the teachings, as we all do, that they wanted to have churches and spiritual centers and communities that were focused around that. Originally, Ernest was reluctant on that, but initially, although initially he eventually allowed himself to acquiesce and started supporting the growth of churches, initially in the California area, but they also blossomed all across the U.S. and around the world eventually. And during that time, his original educational institute was focused on the teaching of classes, the creation of practitioners, the use of the principles of Science of Mind. And it was in the late 30s, early 40s, as the churches grew, they needed an organization to sort of oversee and coalesce and coordinate the efforts of the church structure. So the International Association of Religious Science Churches was formed, the IARSC. And as these churches were formed, and a lot of people wanted to come together with the folks from other centers. And that created the birth of the summer conferences. The first actual summer conference was held not at Asilomar in Monterey, California, but it was held in the Sierra Nevada mountains at Camp Sierra. And what I'm showing you on the screen now is the program from that first summer conference in 1953. And in this particular conference, you can see some of the things, that are going on there. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but it was very well received. And every day there was a talk by Ernest Holmes. And those talks were extremely well received. And eventually were led into a book that was published after the conference was over. But everybody considered this a great success. And in fact, attendees were able to get, after the conference was over, a scrapbook that was published. You can see the date, August 1953 there, where it got memories of the summer conference, and people just really enjoyed the time together. And one of the things that was a beautiful inclusion in this particular scrapbook was this giant fold-out picture of all the people who attended the conference. And so you can see that, the vast number of folks who went to this conference, again, 1953, sponsored by the International Association of Religious Science Churches. Ernest Holmes is down in the front, right there. I was close in on that, and you can see there he is with a little to the side of the people holding the sign. He's got a little child in his lap, and so excellent reception. In fact, the folks wanted to do it again. And I mentioned there was a book that came out of the conference, and this is the book that was published. It was a book of his lectures from that time at Camp Sierra in 1953. Well, 1953, led into 1954. And for those of you who are students of Science of Mind, what you may recall is that the International Association of Religious Science Churches and Ernest main educational institute, which was changed its name to the Church of Religious Science early in the 50s, there was some differences of opinion on administrative stuff that I don't want to go into, but it's just simply there became what was known as the split. It was a change where the two organizations who were coordinating and working together had differences of opinion, broke apart, and they went their separate ways. They still supported and loved each other and taught the same thing and all of that, but you had sort of like two main organizations that were teaching Science of Mind, and that started early in 1954, and it went all the way to 2012 when the two organizations were reunited under the umbrella of Centers for Spiritual Living. The two organizations continued individually to have their own summer conferences. Now, again, Ernest Holmes was with the Church of Religious Science, and although he supported the groups of the IARSC, IARSC had their own conferences, and they did for another half century here. And what I'm showing you on the screen now is a brochure from the 1954 conference from the IARSC. They continue to hold. I went back to the Camp Sierra in the Sierra Nevada mountains in '54, and their main speaker was Dr. Raymond Charles Barker, and he spoke each day. But and a lot of the other ministers who were in that particular organization also were highlighted during the time. And then they continued to stay at Camp Sierra for another year. You can see the third conference, and again, Barker is their main speaker. And their fourth conference, the IARSC moved to, the Del Hotel in Coronado, California, which is right off the coast of San Diego, and a beautiful setting. But they held it there for 1 year, and then they moved their conference. And this is just, I don't have a brochure from their first Asilomar conference, but I did have this here, which let me show it a little closer for you, is a listing from one of their ministerial newsletters where they're mentioning the fact that they are going to have their summer conference in Asilomar starting in '57. So this is the organization that was the IARSC, as opposed to the other organization, which Ernest Holmes kept and stayed more heavily involved in and was the lead of, and that was the Church of Religious Science. The Church of Religious Science actually then began going to Asilomar in 1954. So what you had was, in '54, Ernest Holmes had his first summer conference at Asilomar, and he continued going there through the time of his transition. He transitioned in early 1960. So the transcripts and documents that we have run the period of 1954 through 1959. And what we did in terms of compiling the book was to find every one of the transcripts that we could and put them in the book. But we did not locate every transcript. I'll just simply say that. Here is briefly just a picture of the fact that a newspaper, when the Asilomar grounds became a state park for California, which is kind of interesting. Here's a few pictures of Asilomar during the time period. This is what it looked like, and it looks very much like this today. You can see this is the house or the cottage to which Holmes would stay in on the grounds, and here is a picture of Dr. Holmes with one of the clients there. Let me bring these up a little more fully for you. And here, you got to consider that, Holmes was fairly well known as a spiritual teacher at the time. And so many people came to the Asilomar conferences to hang out with him and to be with him. And so he was somewhat of a celebrity, getting asked for his autograph, and people would want to be posed with him with pictures. And there's lots of pictures of him being, taken with various participants. Here's somebody taking a picture of somebody taking a picture of Ernest Holmes as well. And he would also sit with clients out on the deck of the social hall and talk with them about spiritual matters and answer their questions. And here he is posing in front of one of the buildings. There's more of these pictures in the book. Now, I stopped on this one because one of the things that I wanted to indicate is that we don't have all of the talks. And so as I was going through and compiling the individual book, what we realized is early on is that we didn't have someone. I won't go to describe all the efforts we went through to try to locate the missing talks, but what we did do some extensive research and contacted a lot of people and so forth. And ultimately, one of the things I did discover is that the talks I had compiled, there was a document that I think was probably made from the 1970s, which I located, and it's the one here on the screen. Somebody else had done the same sort of thing and had created what they knew, and that's essentially what I had, with the exception, there's a couple of differences. I'll simply mention that on 1957, they show that they have a transcript of a talk on the 13th of July, 1957. We do not have that. However, that was the final date of the conference, and it was the date where Holmes would always do a little final sermon by the sea, where he would go and talk to people as they were about to leave. We have no record of or transcript of that. However, we do have the final transcript of his sermon by the sea, which is the August 15th of 1959, and that's his most famous talk. And many people are very familiar with that one. So what you see there, though, is that somebody in the 1970s compiled the talks and had essentially the same ones that we were able to locate. However, you'll notice a couple of things. He talked every day, but we'd only have one talk from 1954, and we don't have any from 1955. So, and we were not able to locate them. And you might ask, well, how do we know there were any talks? We were able to locate the program for 1955, and in it does show that Ernest Holmes was talking. This particular date, I'm just going to show you this one, that you can see that he was doing a talk in the middle of the day around 11 o'clock on the science of mind and inspiration of spirit. But every day in the program, it shows him talking, and we were not able to locate those particular talks. There's another day in that particular 1955 for which we don't have the recording, so or the transcript, I should say. However, we were able to get a lot of the transcripts out, and they are compiled in the book. And let me stop and just see if there's any comments, questions. Let's see, Lori, good morning to you. Thanks for the questions and comments from others. Nothing pertinent to what we're talking about right at the moment. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to drop it in the chat, and I will try to elaborate on anything. But what I want you to get to see is there was this wonderful time where Ernest was going, and all the religious scientists who attended the various churches were invited to come in. And because they were steeped in science of mind, Ernest Holmes often went a little deeper. He talked about a little different concepts. And I thought it might be cool just to stop for just a moment. I'm going to play you just a few minutes out of one of Ernest Holmes' talks. And so let me just see if this will work.
Individual expression. Now, I've told you over and over that there is no such thing as reincarnation. And Donald Curtis, whom I ought to know very well, he spends a great deal of time in our own home, first thing he says is, there is. Now, you see, I'm not mad at him, and he isn't sore at me. Because if there is, I suppose we'll know it in due time, although I didn't know it this time. And if there isn't, we won't have to know it. It's like I always say about passing on. If you keep on living, you'll keep on living, and if you don't, you won't know anything about it anyway. Of course, I think we do. Now, I do not know of any spiritual movement in the history of the world, modern, medieval, or ancient, which has ever accomplished through an organization a degree of freedom and individualization within an organized body as the body of religious science has in the last 30 years. Now, this is a lot to say, because during this process it sometimes looks as though there was considerable disagreement, and some come in and some go out, and some wonder why some came in and why some went out. And I never asked myself why they come or why they went, because it's none of my business. I know this, that we have the only spiritually free to the individual organization, organized enough to keep it from falling apart at the seams, and it split several times at the seams, that the world has ever known. It gives promise for the future. I'm not a prophet, else I would wear whiskers. I think whiskers are unsanitary and they itch my face. But I wouldn't be surprised that we might be laying a cosmic egg. It looks that way. It'll just be a question of whether we sit on it long enough to hatch out a lot of chickens. Time will prove that, and beyond my time, I wouldn't be surprised if we do. It will be the most remarkable thing in the evolution of spiritual institutions if we do, because it was never done before. Most religions are based on revelation. I suspect revelation, because it doesn't ever seem to be twice alike. There is no God who will tell us one thing one day and another thing the next. And one of the first things I discovered in my determination to analyze for the purpose of synthesizing the great religious spiritual aspirations of the ages many years ago, and have done it continuously since, because I am familiar with the great religions of the world and what they stood for. One of my first endeavors was to set down all the revelations of the ages, giving as much authority and validity to one as another, and letting each speak for itself to see what the facts would prove. And when I found that it was very evident that the contradictions were too great to sustain a unitary cause back of them, I rubbed that out. Then when it came again it was, I rubbed that out. And then when it came again that it was, I rubbed that out. You know, before I got it all done, the pencil was dull and the eraser worn out. It's interesting.
You know, I wanted to share that just for a number of reasons. One, it's always great to hear the words of Ernest Holmes in his own voice, but you get the flavor of his talks at Asilomar. That was an excerpt from the one recording, the one audio file that we've been able to find from Ernest speaking at Asilomar. Now, we have in the archives close to 200 recordings of Ernest Holmes, and we've been putting them out on the Science of Mind Archives website for members and subscribers. I encourage you to go check that out. But this is the only one in our collection that we have associated with his talks at Asilomar. And I like, but it was, we think more were recorded, because many of the transcripts that we have reference the fact the recordings cut off here, or the recording started here, or this part of the record. So we think that the transcripts were made from recordings, but we don't actually have the audio recordings. But that little clip that you heard was from the one, an excerpt from the one that we do have, and the archives will be making that available, later this year. I do want to mention just a little bit more about the archives. I encourage you to support it. They are in the midst of a physical move, and the archives is both a little museum, and it has lots of paper resources that you can tap into for doing research on Science of Mind. These are the resources that that get digitized and put up for you to download off the website. Recognizing that most of you don't have access to come to Golden, Colorado and visit the archives, they do have a website, which I mentioned earlier that I work with in volunteer status in terms of putting stuff up on. And I encourage you to go check it out. It's scienceofmindarchives.com. I'll put the banner up there on the screen. And let's see. And I encourage you to check it out and become a member of the archives. If you do that, you're able to download every month up to 20 downloads. And that's documents and audios and so forth. And I also mentioned earlier that we have some free resources, one of them being a research inventory. If you go to the website and you go to the research tools page, you will find a link that allows you to find access to all of the listing of all the documents that we have of Ernest Holmes, and we've been able to find, and whether they're up on the website yet, it helps us track what we're doing. Plus, there's a number of other resources you can tap into. I also encourage you to sign up for their Lunch and Learn programs. We've been using the audios files especially from his series of 45 records that he issued in the 1950s, for these Lunch and Learn sessions. And it's a Zoom call that you can join in on, listen to the recording, get in breakout groups, and discuss what Ernest was talking about in the record that was played. And that's kind of a cool way to hear what's going on as well. A lot of resources on the Archives YouTube page as well, including one I'm going to be showing you in just a moment. So I also invite you to go to YouTube and search for the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation and follow them. The Archives is moving because of CSL moving from its space in Golden, Colorado. The Archives is moving, and they're having a fundraising program right now, and I encourage you to check that out and help them fund the cost that will be associated in moving the Archives to a new location, and you'll be hearing more about that. Now, let me just for a moment, again, if there's any questions, drop them in the chat. But what I wanted to sort of paint the picture for you is the fact that this book is a compilation of talks that Holmes gave, and you got a little bit of flavor of what they're like by hearing his words. It's those words that were transcribed and put into the book. And so the book is his talks. There's 28 talks in this book, covering the years 1954 to 1959. And it is, it also includes a 5-part class on mysticism that he taught. And so the book is available on Amazon. You can go to Amazon and search for, the title, and if you do so, you will find it and you're able to purchase it. However, after the book was published, this is an exciting and interesting thing, is that we had finalized the book and already sent it off for publication, and I was on to another research project, and in the midst of researching another matter which will hopefully come out later, dealing with some other things that Holmes worked on late in his life, came across a VHS tape. In fact, I've got it right here. And it was in the archives. And who uses VHS anymore? Certainly we didn't have a VHS player at the archives. And it has a little sticky note on it that says, and I don't know if you can read that, but it says, "Old Asilomar from Helen Spencer, Banning, California." And that was all the information that we had on it. But since we had just finished a book on Asilomar, I was interested in what the heck is that. And so I took it home, got my VHS player out of the garage, hooked it up, played the tape, and that VHS is about 28 minutes or so of this family's home movies filmed in Super 8 color film, silent, in the 1950s. Lots of vacation footage. But in the middle of all this vacation footage was 2 minutes of a religious science conference at Asilomar, and it included some film of Ernest Holmes. Now, up to that date, the only film of Ernest Holmes that was known of was the one TV show of his that got recorded on the old kinescope technology, which is available, by the way, on the Archives YouTube page. And so it was exciting to see another video of Ernest Holmes, another film of Ernest Holmes. I've always been surprised that there weren't more films of him. There's so much audio film, and there's so many pictures of him, but the fact that there was such a limited filming of him in motion pictures was always kind of curious to me. So in that, what we did was we digitized the video, the VHS video, and we have also searched out and found the family. The woman who actually, what I've come to discover is this woman and her husband went to religious science conferences in the 1950s. She was friends with other religious science ministers, as were her daughters. The woman and the husband passed away in the 1960s. The woman passed away in the 2010s. And it was her granddaughter that was able to track down who gave me information about the backstory of the family and how they came to go to religious science conferences, et cetera. And so what we're going to show you, if you haven't been out to YouTube to see this yet, we're going to take a moment and just watch this short video, which I think will be kind of cool. If you've never seen a video of Ernest Holmes, this is in silent footage, and it will give you you get to see not only Asilomar in the 1950s, but you'll see a little bit. Now, I want to mention just a couple of things before I show the video. Let me go back to the slides I was showing you. And this particular slide indicates that conference in 1959. This was in a newsletter that was sent out, and it shows in it that there is it was what the youth was going to be doing at that particular conference. And it highlights the fact that the youth were bused from Los Angeles to Asilomar on the first day of the conference. And on the last day of the conference, they board buses to head back to LA. And so this brochure in a ministerial newsletter indicates that the youth were bused back and forth. That's become pertinent because you're about to see youth boarding buses, which leads us to believe that this video clip includes people boarding the buses, the youth from the Asilomar conference, boarding the buses to return to home. And so if that is the case, and if this newsletter matches up with what we think when this video was filmed, this video would have been filmed on the morning of the last day of the conference in 1959, which was also the morning that Holmes gave his famous Sermon by the Sea talk. So anyway, without further ado, let's now Holmes is not in this clip. This is showing the lowering of the flag ceremony, which was also listed in some of the brochures. That every morning they did a ceremony to raise the flag and lower the flag. And there's Ernest. And somebody's asking him for an autograph to sign his book. Ernest is in the plaid jacket. This is the people boarding the bus. You can see him there in the center there, the plaid jacket, talking to people. Part of the social hall at Asilomar. Saying goodbye to a family who's leaving. I might add, in the discovery of this video, we were able to give a copy of it back to the family. The granddaughter had never seen it, as neither had any of the other relatives. And apparently, when it was discovered and sent to the archives, which we have no idea when it was either earliest it could have been would have been in around the 1990s. Most likely, it was given to the archives sometime in around 2000, early 2000s would be my best guess. This is the kids leaving on the bus. Now, what we did in this particular video is we, knowing that people wanted to see Holmes, we created them in slow motion for just his clips he's in. So again, this was the brochure I was showing. Just for completion's sake, I did want to say in 1960, but between that time and when the next conference was held the following year at Asilomar, Ernest Holmes passed away, and the inside of the brochure had a little honoring for him, acknowledging that he had transitioned on April 7th of 1960. If you want to know more about what his time and life was, the best sources for coverage of what he did at Asilomar are these two books, which you can find out. I think they're also available through as downloads from the archives, as I recall. But it's his brother Fenwick Holmes did a biography of him, which has some chapters that discuss his time at Asilomar. And then William Hornaday, along with Harlan Ware, wrote a biography of Holmes that has some references to the time at Asilomar as well. So good resources on that. And again, I would encourage you to check out the Ernest Holmes at Asilomar book. It's as you can see, it's $24.95, and it's available on Amazon. You can also go to shopcsl.org. It will take you to Amazon as well. But if you just go to Amazon and search on Ernest Holmes at Asilomar, you'll find the book. It's also available as a Kindle book for $9.99. So thus endeth the commercial for the book. But I do want to, just reference, that, Shay's asking me this is so cool. Are there any more videos of him? Shay, the only two videos I know are this one and the one he did and at some point I'd love to talk about this. This is one of the projects I'm researching. It's in the late 50s. He did a 13-episode TV show on a TV station in Los Angeles, of which there's only one video recording. However, most of the programs were recorded on audio, and we have been putting some of those out on the archives websites for you to hear his audio of the TV show. And the way we know they're TV shows was the dates, the content, and the very fact that you can hear them talking about chatter, but both before and after the show about stay tuned on channel 13 for blah, blah. And so we know they're from the TV stations. But this video you just saw is only one of two known videos of him. And the other one is that one recording of his TV show from the 1950s. And it's available on the archives website. If you go to YouTube and search for, if you search for Science of Mind Archives and Library, you'll take you to their page and you'll find the video there. Also, you'll find this video that you just saw. It's also out there as well. We just recently posted it on the YouTube channel, and you can now show it, watch it again, and show it to your friends and family and anybody else who is interested in this particular thing. Thank you for all the kind comments. I don't know if there are any questions. I know we're coming to the close today, and it was probably more of a presentation than a conversation. I do recognize that. Yeah, and it's been a great pleasure for me to continue to serve in the archives and bringing more and more content out. I encourage you to go to the archives website, join, become a member. You get 20 downloads every week. Every week we post a new unpublished document of Holmes up on it. It comes out every Monday morning, 6 a.m. Denver time. And every Thursday we post a new audio. And the audios are available for streaming or download. And we have a whole queue of more of them that are coming out. And not only are we posting Holmes audios, we're also posting audios by Raymond Charles Barker, a famous New Thought teacher from the early part of into the late years of the 20th century. So encourage you to check those out as well. It's just great resources of the archives. Yes, it's emotional seeing them. I tell you, when my wife and I were watching the home movie, and when those clips came on of Ernest Holmes, we almost cried, because it was like we knew the historical significance of seeing that video, and that it had laid in the archives unknown, in a drawer, obviously for many years, and nobody had ever put two and two together to recognize that it was audio of Holmes. So it was wonderful to be able to do that. Hey Nadine, how are you doing? It's great to hear from you, and I'm glad you're on today, and I hope it was something you enjoyed. And yeah, Linda, hope this was informative. I really do. Again, what you got today was a little bit of a mini presentation of what I did at Asilomar, which was a little bit of a shortened version of what's in the introduction to the book. So if you want to know more about the history of Asilomar, the history of Holmes, the history of Holmes at Asilomar, stories of him at Asilomar, where he stayed and what it was like and what he liked to do and how we compiled the talks and and what we know about him. And then the talks themselves are the star of the show. I don't have in the interest of time, be able to get into one, but I had a few quotes. But at least when in hearing that audio, you get a taste of what it was like. But I will tell you that we're getting great feedback from people who are reading these, and it's if you're a student of Science of Mind, you're really going to benefit from reading these words of Holmes. On the one level, they are deeper metaphysical concepts, and probably not the easiest introduction to Science of Mind. But I've had other people tell me they think that it's an easy intro because his spoken word has such a humanness to it, such a warmth and flavor to it, that it's been something that allows them to connect with him at a deeper level than some of his other works are. And I think that's true. I think I know on my website, consciousbridge.com, which I will throw a banner up for that in a second. I wrote a blog a few months ago where I just pulled some extracts from the book, and where he used humor. And I think if you listen to that clip closely, you could hear that he was trying to bring spiritual concepts in and also bridge it with a sort of self-effacing humor that sort of like, pointed out his limitations, and also pointed out his own recognition that he's not this separate person for us to put up on a pedestal. And I think by watching that video, listening to the tape of him, and reading his spoken words, we get more of a sense of the humanness of Ernest Holmes. Yes, we're all the spiritual beings in the oneness of the divine, but we all have our individual unique expressions. And I think that when we can tap into that uniqueness of, as we had with, in his writings, his writings sometimes can be edited to the point, and they're so deep and so mystical that maybe a little of that humanness gets edited out. But I think in listening to his spoken words, you get that real flavor of the individual. So I hope this has been beneficial for you. Again, I invite you to check out a number of resources. Go to the scienceofmindarchives.com and become a member, and you can get access to more audio recordings of Holmes. Go to their YouTube page, subscribe to that. We have more videos that we're actually coming out with later this year. I'll just give you a sneak preview of one. It's a video that was made in the 1970s. It's got Robert Stack in it, Della Reese. It's a lot of people doing testimonials about the Science of Mind. It was made as a Science of Mind promotion back at that time. It's going to be coming out later this year. We recently published a video that is a biography of Holmes that's out on their YouTube page. That is a biography of Holmes in pictures. And it's a fascinating way to get the story of Ernest Holmes by watching that video. A lot of resources there for you. And I also encourage you to check out my website, which is scrolling across the screen. I thank you all for watching today. Hope this has been beneficial. And join us again next week for our next exploration of the science of mind and spirit in these Saturday morning conversations. Until then, take care.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe DeMuro.